Okay, in this second video, we are going to take a more detailed look at the process that is set in motion when we shut down the left hemisphere of the brain. In the Buddhist tradition, they usually talk about this process as involving doing nothing. I have with me here Chogyam Trungpa's basically excellent book called The Myth of Freedom. It's worth getting a hold of and browsing for reasons that I'm about to mention. Its instructions are not usable sort of verbatim or word by word. And this is because, well, here's what Trungpa says. Meditation is simply the creation of a space in which we are able to expose and undo our neurotic games, our self-deceptions, our hidden fears and hopes. We provide this space through the simple discipline of doing nothing. And this language is pretty much common to all of the serious Buddhist teachers. And the reason they use this particular phraseology is because in the over 2,000 years of their practice, the Buddhist tradition never really understood the difference between the two hemispheres of the brain and their completely different functioning in human consciousness. It's not that intuitively they were aware of it, but they could never name what they were dealing with as the two hemispheres of the brain. And therefore, their instructions and their commentaries are very poetic in many cases and kind of convoluted and difficult to follow. But now that we do know what are the functions of the two hemispheres of the brain, we can approach this process of shutting down the left hemisphere much more directly and much more clearly.
Our left hemisphere thinks linearly and methodically. Our left hemisphere is all about the past, and it's all about the future. Our left hemisphere is designed to take that enormous collage of the present moment and start picking out details, and more details about those details. It then categorizes and organizes all that information, associates it with everything in the past we've ever learned, and projects into the future all of our possibilities. And our left hemisphere thinks in language. It's that ongoing brain chatter that connects me and my internal world to my external world. It's that little voice that says to me, hey, you got to remember to pick up bananas on your way home. I need them in the morning. It's that calculating intelligence that reminds me when I have to do my laundry. But perhaps most important, it's that little voice that says to me, I am. I am. And as soon as my left hemisphere says to me, I am, I become separate. I become a single, solid individual, separate from the energy flow around me and separate from you. Our right human hemisphere is all about this present moment. It's all about right here, right now. Our right hemisphere, it thinks in pictures, and it learns kinesthetically through the movement of our bodies. Information in the form of energy streams in simultaneously through all of our sensory systems, and then it explodes into this enormous collage of what this present moment looks like, what this present moment smells like and tastes like, what it feels like, and what it sounds like. I am an energy being connected to the energy all around me through the consciousness of my right hemisphere.
So the first very helpful piece of language we have, because we understand the neuroscience involved in this process, is that we don't say that we create the space through the simple practice of doing nothing. What we say is, oh, no, no. So we create this space by having the left hemisphere do nothing. We are shutting down the left hemisphere. But in place of doing what the left hemisphere does, our brain becomes very active in doing what the right hemisphere does. We are not engaging in this practice called meditation by doing nothing. We're actually engaging in this practice called meditation by very actively doing something completely different than what the left hemisphere does. And the left hemisphere is a very aggressive, controlling, grabbing aspect of our consciousness. What the right hemisphere does, the right hemisphere is extremely awake and alert and actively receptive. So, the process of engaging in this practice that we're going to call meditation involves turning our attention to what the right hemisphere is aware of. And what that is our body as a very active, complex, and full field of energy processes and energy transactions. So we turn our attention to what's going on in our body. It's kind of like taking the back off a wristwatch. I remember doing this when I was, like 8. And then when you do that, you see, whoa, there are all these complex pieces moving around and, doing this and doing that. And you realize that if I'm going to understand and grasp what's going on here, I have to go through a learning process. Now, I never really learned how to fix watches, but it became a good example for me of what is involved when we engage our right hemisphere. So when we do this, when we turn our attention to the energy system that is our body, first thing we notice that there is a lot going on here. And one of the ways that the traditional practice has of getting us started in, learning how to find our way in this complex set of energy flows is to start with tracking our breathing. And breathing is a very interesting generator of energy transactions. First of all, there's the raw physical act of taking a breath, and when you are taking a breath in this meditative state of mind, you notice what muscles in your body are doing. There's the intercostal muscles, the muscles between your ribs, expand and contract. Then, of course, there's what the diaphragm is doing. The diaphragm is expanding that area of your body and drawing the air into your lungs. And then, of course, the air being drawn into your lungs is rich in oxygen. and this oxygen gets immediately transferred into your bloodstream, and the blood coming out of your lungs during the act of breathing is the rich oxygenated blood that transfers neuroprocessors and various nutrients to your whole body. So, and all that process that's going on is very real and very physical. And if you slow down your perception carefully enough, you can start to feel what's going on there. So the first stage in this kind of meditation, which again I remind you, it's not a state of diminished awareness. It's a state of heightened awareness. You get very alert and, in a sense, very entertained. There's a lot going on here. So you're noticing all this, and you're entering into that aspect of your body as an energy field that we might call routine processes, routine muscular processes. One of the things you can do if you're standing up, you can maybe do some Tai Chi-like movements. And as you do these movements, you can pay attention to what your muscles are doing. You can feel your muscles expand and contract. And this particular exercise is a beginner's exercise in tuning yourself into your ability to track what's going on in your body. And so there are your major muscle movements, and then as you're paying attention to this process, you know that there are some micro muscle movements. For instance, there's what your eyes are doing when they blink, and if you're talking, there's what your jaw is doing. These are small muscles. So this whole exercise of paying attention to your movements is a beginner's exercise in getting used to tracking what is going on in your body. So these are the first things that you can get engaged with in this process of paying attention to your body as an energy field. All right. The second level of things that you're going to run into are basically trauma imprints. Every human being has had certain experiences starting, in many cases starting in the womb, and certainly starting in the first year and a half of life before there was any actual speech. They have had difficult circumstances. They may not, they may have been too cold or too warm, or something sudden has happened that has scared them. And these are all little, they can show up as little lesions to your information processing system, the information processing system that is your body. So if you get scared or disappointed or treated badly in that period of time, then this is going to show up as you're now looking at your body as an energy field, or you're perceiving your body as an energy field. It's not exactly looking, it's more kinesthetic. You're going to run into these little, they're kind of like knots. They're little groups of neurons where the energy does not move, the energy is stuck. And it kind of, it shows up as, oh, wow, what's that? And it can show up as something very small, which will release itself with no difficulty. Or it can show up as a mysterious and dark knot of unmovable energy. And the basic technique there is, when you run across a big knot, you say, oh, that's a big knot. So you step back and you relax, and you don't try to do a left hemisphere thing of overcoming it. You do a right hemisphere thing. Well, let me just step back and observe and get what is going on here. What is this thing? You kind of look around it. And Trungpa has some very interesting descriptions of what this process is like. Feel the ground softly. Don't rush into things. And when you do that, the law of nature is that when you observe and contact one of these difficult knots of blocked energy, it spontaneously releases. That's basically the law of nature. And when it releases, you will have the experience of a release of primary emotions, which can show up as crying, or it can, if it's really dramatic. I mean, my first experience of this was at a workshop in 1983 out in Sonoma County with the Earhart Seminar training people, where I had this knot of blocked energy, which I felt was living up here in the back of my neck, in that part of the brain, the lower brain, and I could not get it to release by myself. So I mentioned to the person who was guiding this part of the process that I had this thing that was blocked, and he basically said one word. He said, "Mother," and when he said that, boom, this thing released, and I had a very substantial endorphin rush that moved into a state of euphoria 12 hours later and so forth. And that moved into a state of a kind of a euphoric state of consciousness, which lasted basically for a couple of weeks, in which I felt unusually invulnerable. And they had warned me about this in the workshop, that this could happen. And that when you get into this state of euphoria, you have to be careful not to make any important decisions, because they didn't explain this, they didn't know this, but what we know now is that what's going on there is that when you release this damaged neuron, which is holding up the passage of energy, your whole endorphin system, your whole system of neural processors proceeds to rearrange how it flows through your body, since it does not have to encounter this obstacle anymore. And this rearrangement of the neural processes is experienced as a certain state of euphoria. And when the neuroprocessor system does rearrange itself and stabilize itself, then you'll go back to your normal awareness and your normal caution, and you can make realistic decisions. So that's an example of a fairly dramatic release of a trauma imprint. And as I reflect on that process took place in 1983. And in those days, we really didn't have a full grasp on what we were doing. So we were kind of basically thrashing around, sort of clumping around, doing things in a kind of a clumsy way. And so when you do things in kind of a clumsy way, dramatic pyrotechnics can take place. But when you progress to the point where you have a very sophisticated knowledge of what is going on here, trauma imprints overwhelming your information processing system when you're very, very small, and that this is a lesion, it's an emotional lesion, and the way it responds to treatment is by basically doing nothing to it, by standing by, observing, and waiting. And when you stand by and calmly observe and wait, then it releases itself. And it can release itself in a non-pyrotechnic way. It can just release itself. And there is a release of primary emotion, but it's a slow and gentle release of primary emotion. And then when you succeed in neutralizing one of these trauma imprints, you go through that euphoria. You have a couple of weeks of slightly invulnerable sensibility, and then you're going to enter a clear space. You feel better, and then you go on with your life, and then you're also going on with your practice. You're looking into yourself on a regular basis. And when you do that, it's very rare for all of the trauma imprints that your body and psyche have ever experienced. Very rare for them to all be released at once. So my thinking about that over the years has been, I think what happens is that the trauma imprints that are earliest in our life are the ones that the right hemisphere gets access to first. And boom, it explodes that. And that sort of, and then so that piece gets taken care of. But there are other pieces floating around. And now that you're in a more expansive state of mind, you can get access to those other pieces, and they come up. And then the same process happens over and over again. But each time it happens, it's a more familiar process. It's an easier process, and so that's sort of the mid-range of self-healing that goes on in this kind of meditation. So that's the mid-stage of the process that starts when you shut down the left hemisphere of your brain and start using your right hemisphere. So that mid-stage is a process of the right hemisphere discovering trauma imprints, and then you allowing that discovery to take place, and just allowing those knots of blocked energy to unravel themselves and release. And this happens probably several times over an extended period of time. And as you're going through this process, what appears to happen, so you're clearing out, as it were, these thickets of blocked energy in your psyche or in your unconscious, depending on the language you want to use. Your whole sense of reality, of actual reality, starts to get clearer and clearer. And you start to get flashes of the big picture. I think Trungpa calls this panoramic awareness. One of the phrases he uses is transcendent common sense. And the first time you get these flashes, it is a flash. It goes by, and kind of your mind says, what was that? But it goes by so fast, you're not really. It's like seeing something passing by you really quickly when you're looking out the window of a train, just going by so fast you don't really know what it is. So you're getting these flashes of the big picture, and then, after you've been hanging out with the process for a while, there comes a certain point in time when the flash becomes a stable view. Bang, you get it. This is what Bill Murray portrays in that scene in his 1984 movie The Razor's Edge, where after he's gone to the monastery, and then his master sends him further up into the mountains where he can meditate alone, and he takes his book with him, and he gets this little hut. He tromps through the snow and so forth and so on, and he gets this hut where he's meditating, and then at a certain point in time he gets it. He's sitting there in front of his little fire, looking at his book, and bang, it hits him. So he proceeds to burn a few pages of the book and basically throw the book away. And then now that he's got it, he goes back down the mountain to the monastery, and he goes back to his life in Paris or Belmed or wherever it was. So that happens. There's a point at which you get it. Now, I used to wonder why my friend Steve Stuckey and his colleagues would, after they, became mature in their process, they would still go through these 18-hour meditation sessions that they called sesshin, and they did this on a fairly regular basis. And now I think the reason for that is that once you do get it, it doesn't mean you fully hold on to it. You have to you have to keep going back and say, oh yes, let me check, did I really see that? Because after you get it, it's right hemisphere awareness. You still have to go back and live your life with the left hemisphere. And when you live your life with the left hemisphere, there are all these ups and downs and emotional highs and lows. And this right hemisphere awareness of what you truly are is really a place you go back to regain your orientation towards life. And so that keeps it, has to keep on going on all the time. Okay, so that's basically an outline, a schematic outline of this process of revisionist Zen. Zen organized by reference to the functions of the two hemispheres of the brain. It seems to me that if the instructions are clearer and the commentary is clear, the access to this whole process should be much easier. Yeah, look, why don't we end kind of where we began, with this little passage from The Myth of Freedom. Meditation is simply the creation of a space in which we are able to expose and undo our neurotic games, our self-deceptions, our hidden fears and hopes. We provide this space through the simple discipline of using the right hemisphere of our brain. And eventually we arrive at a process when we're really comfortable with actual reality. And Shunryu Suzuki's comment comes in play here, because when you realize that everything is just a flashing into the vast universe, then you become very strong and your existence becomes very meaningful. And that's kind of the goal of the whole process. So I hope this has been helpful. I think I'll be coming back later to see if I need to pick up any other random pieces that have been neglected. Thanks again. Bye-bye.